I think recognizing that they are human, they are acting out of their own unresolved trauma. It doesn't excuse it, it doesn't make it okay, it doesn't validate it, but it just provides an explanation as to why they did what they did. Also, I think understanding that we don't need to have whoever it was that hurt us to apologize or acknowledge or take responsibility for what they did for us to heal. We get to heal when we want to heal. We don't need closure from other people or anything like that. We get to do this ourselves.
Hi, my name is Lawrence Joss, and welcome to the Family Disappeared podcast. Today we have part 2 with Jen Peters, who is a specialist in inner child work. She has over 12,000 hours of working with this, which is unheard of. And her perspectives and the technology and information she's sharing is wonderful. If you haven't listened to the first episode, I highly suggest going back to listen to that because it dovetails into the second episode. If you're new to the community, welcome. We have a bunch of great resources in the show notes. All Jen's resources are in the show notes too. If you're new to the community, we have a free 12-step program. If you're interested in some group support, it's beautiful. It's a wonderful, loving community. It is 12-step based, and it is about working on yourself. So it's not easy, but it's incredibly useful and saved my life. And if you don't like 12-step or you don't like the group or whatever, go get some support. Find a group, find a community of people that can understand and support you through this journey, because it's impossible. I won't say it's impossible. It was impossible for me to do it by myself. We're also a 501c3 nonprofit. Would love your support if you have the extra resources or connected to other folks that do have the extra resources. We'd love to expand what we're doing and bring you trainings and all the different things that we're talking about, so you have more resources than we're currently offering. And this is what we can currently afford to offer based on the budget that we have. And with that being said, let's see what happens in the show today. You know, when I look at my choices in life that I've made around the spouses that I've picked people that have wounds that mirror my own. So Jen spoke about this a little bit in the first episode, where she was saying that a lot of our inner child wounds, our partners will reflect those same inner child wounds back to you. And I see my dog just jumped in the background, which is sweet. That's in case you can't see her, but that is Ganesha. Anyway, yeah. So our partners reflect back a lot of our wounds. So the partners that I've picked throughout the years are people that have similar wounds to my mother. And those wounds kind of reflect back and mirror back a lot of my wounds. So it feels like a natural thing to do, and it feels like love, and it feels like it's healthy. But as I start to do the inner child work and I can start to see where those wounds were originally created, I can start to see that some of the things that I'm picking in a partner aren't necessarily useful. They're just familiar. And I share that because as I go through parental alienation and as I struggle with these different relationships in my life, that there's some grace and understanding some of my behaviors. And there's also a lot of relief in knowing that I'm not a victim in my relationship with my ex-partner, but I came into this world in this particular way. I had these traumas, and then I found someone that they fit really well with. And the reason that I say that it gives me some relief is because I have power to change. I have agency to do the work. I can work on my inner child work. I can do other emotional and spiritual work. And that's where the relief is. It was never in my ex-partner changing their behavior. Maybe one day my kids' relationship and mine will change, but my relief comes in me doing my own work. So I don't need my kids to tend to my grief, to my loss, to any of my own trauma or original inner child wounds. So I hope that makes sense, because I know I put a lot of pressure on my kids to take care of me. Even though I don't verbalize it and say out loud, I still want them to tell me they love me. I still want them to apologize. I still want them to do all these different things, but that shifted. I've done that for myself. And one day if that's verbalized and we're all in a space where we can have a really good communication and a positive conversation around that, I'd love to have that. And I don't need it anymore. But if you're new, it's so important to understand that I was in so much pain, hated my ex, hated all these different things, wanted my kids to love me, wanted everything to change. And if they would just change, then I'd be okay. And the thing that I've come to find out is if I do the work and I change myself, then I'm okay. and they can do what they need to do or be where they are and maybe one day do the work or not. But I'm still okay, and life changes. The color, texture, everything around it changes. And it's a longer story than I had anticipated telling you. But with that being said, let's see what Jen has to say today. And definitely stick around because she is going to offer a free book to everyone that's listening that would like access to that, to download that, a downloadable ebook, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So let's see what she has to say. How can someone start reconnecting with their inner child? Like, unlike if I'm just driving in my car or I'm sitting at home, like anyone listening over here, is any like basic something you could say so we could even investigate if there is even an inner child? Because it might be so new to some people.
Sure, sure. What I would suggest maybe is get a pen and paper, or in fact, I can send them to you and maybe you can pop them in the show notes, just a couple of steps. What I would do if you're wanting to connect with your inner child, so you can do it in a couple of different ways. You can either, when you're sitting quietly, not necessarily meditation, but definitely not distracted, that would be key, is if there's a particular event that has come up for you that's kind of bothering you or it's activating you emotionally in some way, you might feel slightly triggered or upset about something, just take a few minutes out, sit quietly, and just actually notice. The first thing is think about the event that is bothering you or what has just happened, and notice whereabouts in your body do you feel that emotional charge. When you ask yourself that question, you'll immediately be drawn to that point, like if it's your tummy or your chest or your arms, wherever it happens to be. Then ask yourself, what do I feel like physically in that area? Like, is it tight? Is it heavy? Is it painful? Is it burning? Then you'd want to be asking, what emotions are sitting in this part of my body? And so it brings it down to another layer, and then actually name those emotions, and then imagine that you can connect with the inner child in that part of your body, or the younger version of you in that part of your body. If you just ask to imagine that you can connect with that part first, it just takes a little bit of the pressure away and it's a little bit easier. And you'll notice that you'll actually start either seeing them or feeling them, or you'll get a sense of them coming forward. And that's where you can connect with them.
That sounds like a wonderful, easy step for just being curious about inner child work and connecting with this person. And I'd say for me, as a young child, is super, super useful having some kind of visual that when I'm trying to connect with my inner child, I'm bringing that visual into it so I can drop into this more youthful, innocent place. And I don't know if you use stuff like that with your clients as well.
Absolutely. And in fact, what I'm thinking is I'm really happy to share a free copy, free digital copy of my book, Coming Home, with your people, because in there's obviously all sorts about inner child work. That's what it is about. But there's also the 12 primary themes of inner child trauma and step-by-step processes that you can actually, with your book, walk yourself through. So that'll actually walk you through connecting with the inner child who feels unworthy or ashamed or unlovable, and you'll be able to connect with them and actually begin that healing process.
Wow, that is super, super, super generous. Thank you so much for
No,
that.
my
Super, super kind,
pleasure. It's
super
my pleasure.
generous. Stepping a little bit to the right of the conversation, like, why is it often so difficult for individuals to walk away from relationships? So a lot of people in here have come out of relationships that are super acrimonious and challenging or just blow up one day. And a lot of us also fall into that victim mode in the early part of it. So why is it so difficult to leave? And then what counteracts that victim mode? Does this work counteract that?
That's such a good question, and I can really relate to that myself after going through I guess every divorce probably is difficult, but yeah, it was definitely the lowest point in my life, that's for sure. So I can really relate to what you're saying. So one of the big reasons why it's so hard to walk away from a relationship, even when you know that it's not healthy and you know that you should, and what am I even doing? Why am I putting up with this? We have multiple traumas. Most of us, I've found, tend to have 4 to 6 main wounds. Obviously, it could be outside of that, but that would be fairly common from what I see. So our main wounds, they often match the wounds of our partner. It is just that our partner's wounds tend to manifest or show up in usually the opposite way to ours. Not always, sometimes they'll overlap. But basically, if we feel not good enough, for example, our partner is also going to have a not good enough wound, most likely, not absolutely, but most likely. But for us, for me, for example, in my case, it showed up in lots of different ways actually, but a lot of the time was through over functioning, overdoing, never feeling enough. Whereas with my husband, his not enough wound would show up by almost demanding that I prove myself to him. And then when I did, of course, through my overfunctioning and so on, it would make him feel like he was enough because I was prepared to do X, Y, Z to prove this to him, right? And so this is what's happening with our wounds. Our wounds also become somewhat entangled together. So when we try to walk away, it's really hard because those wounds are still very much connected to each other or entangled with each other. So one of the ways that we can actually walk away and with a lot of ease is to start actually dissolving each of those wounds. So where we might have connected, take, for example, abandonment and attachment trauma, the anxious attacher is going to find it very, very hard to walk away, even though somebody's avoidant, right? And that it's likely to be their partner is somebody who's avoidant or disorganized. So if you were to dissolve your anxious attachment, it makes it very easy to walk away from somebody who is avoidant, right? So that really is the key, is actually dissolving each of those traumas. Sorry, it's a long, convoluted way of explaining it, but that's kind of what's going on in the background. Those wounds are basically entwined with the other person's wounds.
I think that was a wonderful explanation. And the way I see it in my head is all these little strings that both people are holding on to either side, and no one really wants to let go until they learn how to let go. And then they eventually let go of a little bit at a time. And hopefully they can leave and start over. Or maybe the 2x4 comes out and you get knocked out of the relationship, which happens a lot of times,
Yeah.
at least happened for me.
Yeah, same here. You you don't realize that they're nudges, but you are getting nudges along the way, and then it becomes a slap, and then it's just a boom, you just push right over.
Yeah. And you said something interesting that I haven't heard before, where you said most people have between 4 to 6 child wounds, traumas. Are they the same thing or two different things?
Major wounds, I would say. It's just from the work that I've done. When you're going through the work, you start to notice actually how many different major themes of trauma there are. Again, my work does tend to go a lot deeper. So I don't know anyone else who talks in themes and at this kind of detail around this work, but this is what I've noticed. So for example, most of us will have an abandonment theme of trauma. It will be playing out in our own unique way, but we'll have an abandonment wound trauma. From there, we will often have maybe a touch of low self-worth or not feeling good enough, maybe not deserving. With the abandonment, we're nearly always going to have some form of attachment trauma sitting there as well, which really is just a trauma response to the actual abandonment in the first place. It's very common to have an unlovable wound or not loved, depending how we were raised. And if we've got deep wounds of being unworthy, we cannot truly fully love ourselves while we've got those wounds sitting there, because here's the thing is we actually believe them. Intellectually, we know that this is not true. The other 95% underneath believes these wounds. We actually believe that we're not good enough. And that's why we will settle for certain things or prove ourselves or whatever the case may be. So I have noticed that most people will have around 4 to 6 major kind of themes that are really sort of running their life. So if we can focus on dissolving those, you will absolutely, literally change your life in doing so.
And when we're talking about the idea of not good enough, or, the 95% that says we're not good enough, we're not worthy, and we can never get there, even if we overdo it and we take care of everyone, we never quite get there because we're carrying this wound. Does this tie into kind of like this idea that I'm the victim, this happened to me, these things are happened to me, and I have no agency? Are those two wounds tied into the idea around victimhood, or they're completely separate?
No, I think it'll depend on the person. I think they can be separate. I can certainly relate to the victimhood side of things when I was going through a lot of stuff. But I think you can have low self-worth and feel not good enough and not feel victimized as well in that space. I will say with the victimhood, it was definitely, for me personally, it was really hard to move through that, because for me, all I could see is all these things that were happening, and they actually were real and they were happening to me. So how could I possibly see it any other way? But the thing is that we do actually participate on some level in the scenarios that we're in. And it's so hard to hear that. If I'd heard that in the first probably 2 years of my healing, I think just you better be actually out of handshot because I would have been pretty upset about hearing that. But it is true. And the beautiful thing about that is, though, is that we have everything that we need in here to actually completely turn it on its head. The answer isn't out there somewhere. The answer is in here. And the thing is, as well, when we're stuck in victimhood, and again, I very much was there, we can't heal like that. We've got to stop looking at what's gone on over there and, okay, what part of me chose to stay? What part of me just, in my case, it was minimize certain behavior? What part of me excused certain things? What part of me sort of said, oh, well, I know he's had a terrible upbringing, so that's why he does X, Y, and Z. And while that's true, and I'm just being compassionate, I'm also actually the ultimate betrayal for me was me betraying myself for so many years. But of course, I couldn't see that until a few years later.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful that as we go through these challenges that we realize that it's not outside of us, like you're saying, and the ultimate betrayal is just abandoning ourselves over and over and over again. And we can't get anywhere if we're there, like you're saying, once we come home, which is a great title for a book.
Thank you. Came to me in my sleep, actually.
Was
That's
it?
what the title had to be, yeah.
That's funny. Can you explain the concept of reparenting and how it plays a role in healing the inner child?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So, reparenting, I mean, really, this is about us becoming the parent that we never actually had, or the parent that we needed to have. Because let's face it, our parents were parenting through their own trauma, so of course it was going to be passed on to an extent. And we have a lot more information today than they would have had access to in those times. So, reparenting is, for example, somebody who tends to self abandon, and this will be somebody who's codependent or has codependent type patterning. So, they might, overgive or be over understanding. It might be that they overfunction. There's a lot of over happening with self-abandonment. So for somebody who does tend to self-abandon, one of the ways that they could perhaps start to almost reparent themselves is firstly just noticing, maybe even spending some time jotting down, what are the ways that I give away my power or overfunction? What are the ways that I do this? And then just noticing what those ways are and actually starting to put in boundaries in place to stop you from doing those things. And when you notice yourself wanting to do it, go within and actually just imagine just saying to yourself, I know that you had to do XYZ before, but you don't need to do this anymore. I am here now and I will always be here. So just giving yourself those reassurances that you don't need to do those things anymore.
Hmm. I think boundaries is a great example because so many of us were not brought up with that in our household. And then also the reparenting part in there, just to make it super explicit, like when you're reparenting your inner child, we're actually talking to our inner child and saying, I'm always going to be here for you, because our parents weren't necessarily always there for us. So as we tend to our inner child, we're giving them these mantras, messages, loving kindness, whatever words you want to put to it, so that child starts to integrate those parts of themselves that didn't get integrated. And
Mm,
that's how I see it in my mind.
yeah,
And I think that's exactly
absolutely.
what you're saying.
Yep, that's exactly right.
And how does forgiveness play into like this whole reparenting and inner child work? Is like, how do I forgive myself as I see these wounds and I tend to these wounds, but these wounds have created so many other hotspots in my life or other people's lives? Like, how does that work?
That's a really great question. I think, first of all, just really allowing yourself to receive. I'm getting messages as I'm saying this. Allowing yourself to receive that you were only doing what you felt that you needed to do at that time for you to be okay. Now, it doesn't excuse shocking behavior. It doesn't let people off the hook and stuff like that, but it's actually recognizing that we were hurt. We were doing these things. We really were doing the best that we could at that particular time. And this is if we had done anything towards anybody else. It doesn't give us the right to obviously continue doing these things. We now need to take responsibility for ourselves and actually look at what was causing us to do those things in the first place. I will say when it comes to parents, it's really hard. It is really hard, but I think, and I've seen some horrific things, as I'm sure you have too, and saying that parents were doing the best that they could, in most cases that is true, but there are some cases where no, it actually did. There were certainly things that they knew what they were doing. There was a lot of trauma there. But I think recognizing that they are human, they are acting out of their own unresolved trauma. It doesn't excuse it. It doesn't make it okay. It doesn't validate it, but it just provides an explanation as to why they did what they did. Also, I think understanding that we don't need to have whoever it was that hurt us to apologize or acknowledge or take responsibility for what they did for us to heal. We get to heal when we want to heal. We don't need closure from other people or anything like that. We get to do this ourselves.
I love that because so many of us are waiting around for someone to apologize or do the right thing or change their behavior, or especially with the parental alienation stuff as the focus, we're just waiting for the other parent to do something different or the other grandparent to do something different. But we can actually tend to those wounds, and we have all the technology within us already, and definitely need some help to get there. But I love that it's not external. It's definitely a work within us.
Yeah. And I think also just understanding they are not capable of anything more.
Hmm.
They are doing what they're actually capable of. Yes, they could make choices to heal, but the fact is they're probably not. Sometimes we're expecting people to show up in a way that they are simply not capable of. And unless people are doing some very deep work, they're probably not going to be able to change on a massive scale. So sometimes we're expecting something that is just probably not going to happen.
Yes. Yeah. I think so many of us see that in different relationships where people aren't doing the work, and that unresolved
Yeah.
trauma is just running their lives, and they don't even know that they're on autopilot in their
Yeah.
trauma. And then it's just kind of getting splattered all over the place. I definitely
Mm.
experience that often.
Yeah, I bet. Very difficult, especially when you've got children involved. It's not like you can completely step away. You've still got that connection point.
Hmm.
Yeah, very difficult.
You mentioned something before that I just want to circle back to as I'm getting down to some of the last questions here. You mentioned attachment style and the connection between childhood trauma and attachment style and inner child work. Can you just talk to that a little bit and give us a couple of examples, like low level examples of that, so people can understand that a little bit more?
Sure. So attachment styles is such a big thing. I don't know if you've noticed over the last few years, but there's a lot of people speaking about attachment styles, but they are big. There's different names for the different attachment styles depending what theories you're looking into, but the end of the day, the behaviors have just been grouped under different names, basically. So it doesn't matter what theory you're looking at. I like to work with anxious attachment, avoidant, dismissive, and disorganized. So, first of all, attachment styles are the response to an abandonment, generally with our parents. So the attachment style is the result of the abandonment. We experience, now I will say, and I should have said earlier, we don't have to have been physically abandoned by a parent to have an abandonment wound. It's often actually an emotional disconnection is where that occurs. So we experience the emotional disconnection probably repeatedly when we're very young. In response to that, we start to form a set of behaviors. For some of us, we become very anxious and we're going to do whatever mum or dad says because we're so anxious about them not being there or not being able to connect with them. Right. So we'll do whatever they say and we'll become very anxious if we're not able to create the connection. And that obviously is our anxious attachment style that many of us here will be able to relate to as adults. Another way that it will form is that we get so deeply hurt by that disconnection from that parent. We do not want another situation where we can be hurt like that again. So we are not going to connect no matter what. Nothing is going to make us connect. And so that becomes that avoidant or avoidant dismissive attachment style. As adults, those of us who might be guarded or have a wall up or ghost people will become very, very uncomfortable when somebody leans right in and wants to connect. So that's what's happening there. With our disorganized, it's a combination of those, of anxious and avoidant. We have both patterns, both sets of patterns. So, and we oscillate between them. It really depends on the situation and the attachment style of the other person that we are dealing with at that particular time. I can personally relate, not so much anymore, but before, to the disorganized. And there's definitely times where my anxious attachment style has been activated, and there's been times when my avoidant style has been activated. It just has depended on the circumstances.
Thank you for that. And that could be a whole show just by itself, just talking about
It's really
attachment style. So we're going to leave it at that. Feels like a good place. And I'm going to wrap up with this question for you. Can you share a success story from your work that illustrates the impact of inner child healing? A couple of examples of what that could look like on an individual level, and then how that might affect a family system as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, one of my ladies I worked with a little while ago, actually, she was anxiously attached. And of course, when we're anxiously attached, we will usually be in relationship with somebody who's avoidant. So, she really struggled with that a lot because her husband was avoidant. And so, the more she would lean in, the more he would kind of lean out. And that was quite problematic also because with the attachment style, with the anxious attachment, she was really becoming quite enmeshed with her children because she was getting that connection through her children. And that's not ideal for them either, because that starts to affect the ways that they attached. So we did the work with her and actually went back to her original abandonment wound, because that's really where we need to go back to, and healed that original abandonment wound. We dissolved those traumas sitting there. The result for her was the feeling of insecurity and anxiety literally dissolved. And because of that, she didn't have that need to be constantly leaning in, and she didn't get triggered by her husband's slight avoidance. So that was definitely a lot better for her. She didn't have that anxiety, constant anxiety and feeling insecure. And also that will affect her children as well, because her children will be able to connect with her more deeply now as a result.
I love that example about your own inner child work and how the healing happens for you and these things dissolve. And then the impact that it has on the family
Yeah.
system, where the kids no longer have to fall into that place where they're getting triggered or pulled sideways, but they can actually meet the parent in a more deep,
Yeah.
useful, integrated way. And I'll say this for anyone out there that's listening, even if you want to identify your ex-spouse or your current spouse as the problem, if you're doing this work that was just identified by Jen, you can affect the family system and support your kids and their attachment style by just doing your work and not necessarily having to make someone else do some kind of work at the same time.
Absolutely. We can't make anyone else do their work. They'll do it when and if they need to. But the more of our own selves that we can tend to, firstly, we're going to feel a whole lot better. We're not going to be triggered and derailed by whatever they're doing. But also your children, when you do connect with them, when you do have those, either those conversations or time with them, their whole nervous system is just going to it's going to be able to breathe again. I actually see that with my own son. I won't go into too many details, but there's a big difference with his nervous. Even he says, my nervous system relaxes, Mum, when I'm with you, which is crazy for a 16-year-old to say, but we do have these conversations a lot. But yeah, being that safe space for them to just be and breathe is everything.
Oh, what am I? I'm super excited that you're experiencing that with your 16-year-old son, just that shift in a younger person coming to that technology and that languaging and being able to see their body relax and that they're able to breathe gives me hope for my family too. So I really appreciate that little piece. And as we're wrapping up here, we're going to put all your information in the show notes, the book, any courses, anything that you got going on. Is there any last thoughts you'd like to share about something you haven't shared that you're doing, or a resource that you offer, or training, or other ways to connect with you that you'd like to say out loud?
Oh, thank you so much. Firstly, I just want to say I have loved our conversation. So thank you so much. Really, really loved it. But in terms of things I've got coming up, something that actually might be really useful to some of you if you're feeling the call to actually dive into your inner child work is I have a mentorship, a year-long mentorship, but it is what's called evergreen. So you can join at any time. But we're going to be spending a full month on each inner child trauma, each of the 12 primary inner child traumas. So I'll be guiding you in live classes, and there's between session support options and all that kind of stuff. That way you can take the guesswork out and just be guided through healing these traumas at a really deep level and with other people who are actually doing this work as well, because it can get a little bit lonely doing this on ourselves or by ourselves. So yeah, so it would be just absolutely my honor to hold you in the space and guide you through. So I'll give you those details as well. It's called Reclaim.
Reclaim. Ooh, I like your names are good. You got some good names going on. And thank you for your time, for your work that you're doing out in the world, bringing in the spiritual practice into the work that you're doing. I super appreciate that. And it's been really informative and useful. And yeah, I've loved the conversation too. It was super, super easy and super, super flowy.
Thank you. It's absolutely been a privilege. Thank you so much. And thank you for the wonderful work that you're doing in the world also.
Thanks, Jen. Wow. So appreciative that there's so many wonderful professionals out there doing some really phenomenal work. And I love it when someone's really concentrated in one specific area of work, like inner child work, that Jen is, and that she's super committed to it. And we were joking after the show about, we like to go really deep and we want to be in the nuances and we want to be in the depths of this work. And I think it's wonderful that there's people out there that are working on those muscles and that are offering it up to people. And I'd like to say this too, like Jen was incredibly generous with offering a book, with offering some free resources, and she has other stuff that naturally she needs to charge for in order to support herself. But there was a generosity in the conversation today that I just wanted to acknowledge and also say that's part of the healing. As we heal our wounds, we're able to be a little bit more generous without holding on so tight. So I appreciate you, Jen. I appreciate your generosity. I loved the conversation today. And, anyone that's new to the community, wow, that was a good one. And there's a bunch of other great shows in the can. You can go back and we got all different kinds of topics. And thank you for coming out and playing with us for a little bit today. And we hope to see you around the neighborhood. And in case someone hasn't told you yet today, I love you. And that's part of my inner child work, is to love myself so I can love you. And please like, comment, share. We want to hear what you have to say. We want to know if we should invite certain people back, ask different questions, or maybe you just have a reflection or story for yourself that relates back to what we're doing. So have a beautiful day, and I will see you around the neighborhood sometime, somewhere, someplace.